Off the Cuff is back with you after a sizable break. And what better way to resume than with our friend, High Commissioner of Great Britain, Alex Ellis. Tenure too short.
Too short.
Too
I've been here over 3 years. I'm coming back. I lived here 38 years ago, so it's wonderful to be back.
Yeah, and you, like so many of you from Britain, there are some roots. There's a backstory to India.
Yeah, there is. Both I taught in Daly College in Indore 38 years ago. Both my grandfathers were here in the First World War, one of them in the Indian Army. So it's lovely to be here. I love this country. I'm lucky with the timing of doing the job, and I'm lucky in some ways because I came in the middle of COVID. It's a strange time to come to a new country. On the other hand, we did great things together during COVID. And also the focus on India from the UK, from others as well, has been so intense. Coming out of Brexit, and I was working on Brexit, out of the EU, and India is an obvious opportunity for the UK.
Yeah, you've achieved much in your tenure here, and you will list that, but one thing you failed to achieve was an English cricket series victory while you were here.
Yes, I've seen the England cricket team lose in a number of different stadia across India. I could say Ahmedabad, I could say Ahmedabad again, I could say Lucknow, I could say Dharamshala, I could say Chennai. I watched them lose in Delhi as well. It's been a painful business, although they're a great team to watch. The team of 24, I'd rather watch than the team of 21.
They are a great team.
Yeah.
But it's also true that it's one of the rare teams. England team is among the rare teams in the last 20 years to have won a series in India. Not this one, but the previous one.
Yeah.
Under Cook.
Yeah, under Cook, exactly, a decade ago.
Yeah. So maybe next time a team comes, you come in and then you work at it.
I would love to.
Your 3 years here, give me a short summary of highlights. What went well? What did you achieve? What is it that remains unfinished for your successor?
Sure. I often say I do this job for my successor's successor. Change takes a long time in any relationship, 10 years usually. But actually, since I arrived and since we left the European Union, it's been a tremendous focus for the British government. And over those 3 and a bit years, we made big progress on healthcare, first of all. If I think back to the worst bits of COVID, the Covishield vaccine was a great thing between the UK and India. It had more impact on the world than probably anything else we've done.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Would you agree that there was an inadequate understanding of how important was the India-UK linkage was with that vaccine?
Well, let's just remind ourselves of what it was, which was British taxpayer-funded research into a great base in the UK.
Oxford University?
Yeah, coupled through AstraZeneca, then coupled with the manufacturing might of the Serum Institute, and then the distributional networks of India, which are remarkable. We'll see them again, of course, during the election. And done at a low price. The other very important thing to remember is that vaccine was a lot cheaper than the alternatives, and therefore was much more accessible to many
actually more effective than many of the other more expensive vaccines. Yeah. As it turned out.
Yeah.
So is that a regret that this is not painted sufficiently, say, in public opinion? No, definitely in India, maybe in Britain as well, but definitely in India.
I don't think so, no, because we built on the back of it. We've now got a malaria vaccine, which we've done between Oxford University and the Serum Institute again. There's an Ebola vaccine as well. Also, India played an important role in the drugs trial, which the UK launched very early on during COVID, the recovery trial. To see how the various drugs would affect people, particularly of South Asian ethnicity. So that healthcare sort of system, whether that's healthcare workers, whether that's research, whether that's companies together, big investments by Indian companies, pharma companies in the UK, also British pharma companies in India, that is doing very well.
So my apologies for interrupting you. Carry on now.
No, it's fine. If I look, then the second area was, of course, climate change. There you've seen Prime Minister Modi goes to the Glasgow Climate Summit, sets out the ambition of India for the next, for the next 50 years in this case, a net zero target and a shorter term target for how India will start to get there. That was a great moment and helped to get the kind of ambition which we got at Glasgow. Thirdly, defence and security. We now have a great deal more cooperation, particularly in the maritime area, and with much more complex operations being done together. Now, the human contact relationship, we could talk a lot about that, but if you look at who's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, you might not have bet when I became a civil servant that person would be called Rishi Sunak. That sort of shows something about the change in British society as well. And trade and investment, I'm sure we'll get back to that. India, second biggest investor in the UK. UK amongst the top 5, 6 into India. Trade has almost doubled in 4 years. There's a lot of growth. I think overall, think about what Foreign Minister Jaishankar wrote in his recent book. He said it's time post-Brexit for a reset of the relations between the two countries. And that I think we have achieved. Now we have the building blocks, we have to build on that.
Yeah. You talked about defense and security. The fact that it took an Indian defense minister almost 22 years to visit the UK, Rajnath Singh. That was the first one after 2002.
Right. Yep.
So what accounts for that freeze and what changes now?
I think that the sort of geopolitical winds are now blowing to bring the UK and India together. That wasn't always the case over the last 20 years. And so the UK's big investment into the Indo-Pacific, I think India has noticed that. If you look at, we now have the AUKUS relationship with Australia. We've signed up to CPTPP, the trade deal of the Pacific. We are now creating a new fast jet with Japan as well as Italy. That shows you the UK sort of reaching much more into this era. It's the center of the world. One of the joys of my current job is that India is sitting more and more in the center of the world, where most of the world's growth, where most of the world's opportunity will be, and some of its tensions for the next generation or so. So I think that has drawn India and the UK closer together on defense. And it's great that the minister came. We've also managed to create an infrastructure of basic agreements, for example, on logistics, on research, which are going to enable us, and also on maritime domain awareness, very important, which I think we should be able to build on in the coming years. That's why having the British grey hull ships coming into the Andaman Islands and so forth, much greater cooperation is happening between the UK and India. It's a start, and now we have to go further. Next stop will be, I think, fast jet engines. Rolls-Royce, big investor in India, see a great opportunity to work with the Indian Air Force on that.
Yeah, that's a clean slate kind of project.
That would be a big
for AMCA.
Yeah, exactly. And you see, we are one of the few countries in the world, Rolls-Royce, one of the few companies that can really do engines at that level of sophistication.
Yeah. But do you think there's been time lost on that? Because for the longest time, India used British origin equipment.
Yeah.
Air Force, Navy, even the Army.
Yeah.
The Centurion tank.
Yeah.
People have forgotten it. It won India 2 wars. Do you think there's been a bunch of lost decades there?
I think it's an area where we have a lot of ground to make up. I think that the British government is determined to try and do that. We're also talking to India about electric propulsion, because most of our ships now are propelled through electric motors. And we talk a lot to them about how we might be able to work together in India on that. So there's ground to catch up for sure, but that's why you have high commissioners to try and catch up.
Yeah. So the challenges or tasks that remain incomplete or disappointments?
Apart from the disappointment about some of the cricket results, I'd say where are the areas where we need to grow further? So
that's not an area where Government of India could have helped, or your diplomatic skills could have helped.
I don't know. If we could throw Jasprit Bumrah into the trade deal, I think that would be very attractive for the UK. I think we've come a long way on migration. I think we could do more on how we tackle illegal migration, because I think you always want to get the right balance. Where there's been a significant increase in in visas issued to Indian nationals, lots of visitors coming, lots of students and so forth. It's a great thing. But we need to tackle overstayers and people who've arrived illegally, not least because they're vulnerable, and including about the way that they get to the UK. So there's more work to do on that, but we see that as a thing we could do more on. I look at science and technology. Come quite a long way. I look at what the US have done on ISET, and I think that's a good model. And so we are very close now, actually, to reaching some agreements with India, which will enable us to create a framework for science and technology cooperation in the future. And that's got to be in new areas like AI, areas like space. I think there's a lot more we could do there. Defense, we talked about. I think on climate, India's got to go through the extraordinary transformation through the next 25 years in several areas, one of which will be in sustainability. And what happens in India is going to affect the whole of the world, of course, especially India. And I think we could do better in how we cooperate on financing that. Financing that transformation? How do we get more private capital in from the UK in to support that transformation? So there's plenty to do.
And some tensions as well. I mean, it was during your tenure that security outside your home disappeared.
Sure.
So take us through some of that period and what happened, and could it have been handled differently?
I think there's an immediate issue, which is what happened to the Indian High Commission about a year ago.
Yeah.
That was absolutely unacceptable. I totally understand the Indian government's reaction to that and the anger felt about that. And of course, we've done work on that. The police, there are more police outside the Indian High Commission. There are some longer-term solutions we're exploring about how to make what is a property in a very busy part of London, how to make it more secure. There's a longer-term issue, which is how you tackle extremism in the UK, and extremism of any hue. And there, I think we made good progress. The UK has a much better understanding of some of the issues which surround, in this case, Khalistani extremism, but there are others as well in the UK, and we act on it. The police are independent, but they've made some arrests after what happened a year ago. We've also got we closed down TV stations, which are not really TV stations. We look at charities, which maybe not really charities. There are different ways in which you can try and ensure that the vast majority of people in the UK who want a peaceful and prosperous UK with a close relationship with India are able to thrive.
But would you say that tension or that gulf with Government of India has now been bridged? Reasonably so?
That's for the Indian government to say, but we have an excellent cooperation in a lot of areas. And what we don't want to lose is the success both of the people who are coming to the UK from India to study and to work, and also the terrific and thriving community of Indian origin, which is in the UK. One area which I think we could do more on, and I'm working on it, and I hope my successor will continue, is to get more young British people to come to India. Because one of the issues is, I think, that people in the UK don't really understand the modern India and what it's like. And I think there's a great opportunity for the next few years for people to come, just as I did when I was 18, maybe a little bit older as well, to see the new reality for themselves.
How does today's Britain look at India? Does it look at it in terms of its traditional relationships? Because as you said, the new generation has come up now, which may not have the nostalgia. Maybe even the generation before this did not have the nostalgia, but the new one will have none. So how would the UK differ from, say, Canada or any other member of the Anglosphere looking at India? Will it still be UK looking at India as a country we've known well over generations? Or will this be part of the larger vision of the, say, Five Eyes alliance or the Anglosphere?
There will always be a particularity to the UK-India relationship, and that's not least because of the extraordinary human flows between the two countries, particularly India to the UK. There's much more familiarity in some respects now. When you ask Ben Stokes about playing in India, this isn't like some exotic place which you come to once every 5 years. The countries are playing in the IPL all the time.
Absolutely, yes.
This is much more normal.
I'll take Sam Curran in exchange for somebody. Once our FTA is done, maybe we can throw in Sam Curran there.
He's a great point of difference, bowling the way he does. So there's much more familiarity with India in some ways. I think much more opportunity. If I look at some of the companies coming into India, some of the new fintech firms like Tide, for example, they offer business solutions. They are growing very fast in India, and they see that as a great opportunity. So I think it feels different. It feels much more kind of real and more modern, but I still think we can do better to get more people. And also the flow of Indian students to the UK, it's fantastic ambassadors for India. Very talented people. And they are showing what India is like. It's this factory of unbelievable talent coming all over the world. So I think it's a bit different. I look back at, we're 100 years after the publication of A Passage to India, which is a wonderful study, I think, in British miscomprehension of India. I think Ian Forster was extremely perceptive. And the book finishes, the last paragraph is the description of Fielding and Aziz, who had been friends at one point, going off together through the landscape. And Fielding, when the Brit says, can we be friends? Can't we be friends? And the landscape all around, the rocks and so forth say, not yet, not yet. But 100 years have passed. I actually think there's a fantastic opportunity that, yes, we can and we should. I think we have to. Not least given the extraordinary turbulence which sits around the UK and India at the moment and the rest of the world. I think we need that.
While you've been here, you've also seen the India-Canada relations go on in nosedive. I know that this is another country and this is another country, and I'm talking to a career diplomat.
You are.
And I'm committing the cardinal sin of alerting him before asking the question. But could you have advised India and Canada, or India and Canada, or India or Canada to handle it differently?
Well, those countries are two close friends of the UK, and they're talking to each other.
That's the reason I ask you.
And they're talking to each other, I'm sure. Obviously, we want the investigations that are going on in Canada to continue and to reach their conclusion. What matters is, I think, to remind ourselves of the world we're in, a world in which you have a completely different phenomenon from when I joined the Foreign Service, which is a China which is very powerful, very dynamic, an autocracy with a very different view of the world. And we're all countries are adjusting to that, whether that's Canada, whether that is India, whether that's the UK. And so I think there's an ever greater need for the democracies of the world who want, for example, open and free Indo-Pacific to be working together. I think Canada and India don't need any advice from the British High Commissioner about how to work out their
I thought the British advised everybody. Everybody sought advice from the British, particularly the Americans and Canadians.
If they seek it, we're happy to provide it. But sometimes unsolicited advice from the United Kingdom is not always welcome in all parts of the world.
But how much of a setback has this issue been, the Pannun Nijjar issue? Because this has caused some tension in our security relations as well.
Sure, I think there are specific cases which are affecting the United States and Canada. There must be a shared desire to tackle extremism in different forms in all countries around the world, certainly in my country. At the same time, one has to operate within what the law dictates, and we have to respect that and the judicial process. So as we see the flow of people increase between India and other parts of the world, including the UK, much good comes from that. Occasionally there are issues which come from it. The question is, do we have the frameworks? Do we have the trust which enables us to deal with difficult issues, sometimes disagreements, in a way which does not set back the overall partnership, in this case between the UK and India? That's the question I ask myself. My 3 years plus here has been about creating those partnerships and those agreements which enable us to withstand what will always be issues which will arise in any close relationship.
No, your domestic politics. Labour may be in power next year. I don't know who you're going to vote for. But democracies, they can be changed.
Sure.
So in that context, in particular, but in general, you also have a large immigrant population from the subcontinent. Mm-hmm. How much of a shadow will, say, certain populations of immigrants cause in our relationship? That is, Sikhs, people who come from Pakistani origin, Pakistanis, Mirpuris, from Pakistani held Kashmir, mm-hmm. because both are large vote banks. Mm-hmm.
The UK population is getting more diverse. The census came out, I think, in 21, showed that. And that is a great asset of the UK, the diversity of our population. It means we're attracting.
Well, you won't have any spin bowling attack
we have
without your immigrants, yes.
We have talented people coming from all over the world, and our country is the better for it. There are kind of rules about how you manage that and so forth. But let's face it, if I look at the role in public life, the role in business life of people who come to the UK from all over the world, it's a fantastic thing. Our trade minister, born and brought up in Nigeria, our prime minister, his parents came from East Africa. This is something which benefits the UK.
But there is an impression in India that in UK as well as Canada, vote bank politics plays out in some of the policy that affects India.
The UK is a very vibrant democracy in which people talk about all kinds of things. Actually, I think one of the successes of the UK of the last generation, since I first started working, is the integration of people from all parts of life, from all parts of the world, into the United Kingdom. And I think that's one of our strengths as a country. It's a consequence of the unusual history we have. We're an unusually global country. If you look at our kind of projection and our trade and our investment, it's much more global than most European companies. That's because of our history. And we have very successful companies, by the way, as a result of that. Anything from Unilever, very big in India, through to JCB. And I think that is a strength which we should continue to develop. I actually think our democracy is very good at absorbing difference and producing, new kinds of leader who don't look and talk like the leaders of yesteryear.
And there is sufficient understanding of Indian sensitivities across the political spectrum in the UK?
I can't speak for the politicians. I'm a civil servant. But I would say that the representation of different communities in the UK, all of whom see themselves as British, is something which has increased enormously in the last 10 or 20 years. And I think we're a stronger country for it.
But one party might see it as its vote banks, as happens in Canada.
I don't actually recognise the kind of vote bank idea in the UK overall. I'd say
Because 10 years under Stephen Harper, Indian-Canadian relations really improved.
Sure.
And then we again, boom, went down like
I
this.
think what you have is, I noticed, for example, in the free trade agreement discussions, that when it gets discussed in Parliament, the two main parties, both of them, strongly supportive of having a closer economic relationship with India. So I see a sort of continuity of purpose over time by the UK in relation to it.
So that was before I let you go. FTA. Do you still think something is possible? You can salvage it before you say goodbye? So you think it now has to wait for elections in both countries?
FTA is a means towards ends. They're a way of increasing trade and investment between the two countries.
But still, the FTA is
sure.
It was a target.
Yeah. And we've been at it for 2 years. The EFTA one took 16, I think. We're actually, I think, a very long way into it. As I say, trade has almost doubled between the two countries. Investment is very strong. Both sides want to have an ambitious deal. Both sides are working very hard at it, I should say, with a determination that it actually brings real tangible benefits to the economies on both sides. And I think it would be a very helpful underpinning for what should be a natural rise in growth and opportunity in the next.
But what's the prospect it may get done now?
That I'll leave to others to judge. What I noticed, by the way, is a real determination from both governments to try and get.
And how much is the gap?
As they say in the London Metro, mind the gap. But I think we're pretty close, and there is an ambition there to do it. So I can't predict. These are decisions which our prime ministers will have to take ultimately. But I see on both sides they really want to get this done.
Is the India FTA agreement an encouraging sign? See, this government, BJP government, ideologically has not been very keen on trade agreement. Mm-hmm. And the RSS, the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, etc., they've had suspicion of trade, foreign trade. So for them to sign this first FTA is a big deal as far as I am concerned, as a student of Indian politics.
Yeah, I think that the sort of global trading system is under quite a lot of strain at the moment. But what countries are trying to do, including the UK, is to get as many FTAs that make economic sense as they can. And that we've seen with India that now with Australia, with the UAE, reaching agreement now with EFTA. The UK are having left the European Union with many countries around the world, including Australia as well. So I think that there is a great opportunity for that. Of course, it has some symbolic value as well, but it has to have kind of real economic consequence. But it's been, I'm sorry to leave. This is a country of the most spectacular diversity. Anyone who goes to see it, I think roughly in the same month, I went from seeing Bharatnatyam dancer in Chettinad up to seeing the hills in Dharamshala. I've been to the Hornbill Festival,
in Nagaland,
Stepwells in Gujarat, north, south, east, west. This country offers diversity, I think, like no other country I've ever lived in.
So keep coming back, Alex. There will always be friends for you in India.
Thanks.
Thank you. And come to watch cricket. Come to watch IPL year after year.
Yeah. If I can watch Joss Butler just ramping another 6, I'll be very happy.
Absolutely.